I want to share my second screen. Okay. Okay. Hope it's showing up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Stream 1. Some housekeeping before we start. The presentation will last approximately 40 minutes, which will give you about 10 minutes for Q&A. For the Q&A, you'll be able to vote on which question you would like to have asked. Everything will be recorded, and then you'll be sent a link. And these sessions will be available in CVent for 90 days. Then on the Digital Transformation YouTube channel. We're very fortunate today to have as our speaker, Dr. Ransford Mensah, who is the county lead in Sierra Leone for Digital Impact Alliance. Dr. Mensah is the county manager for the UN Foundation Digital Impact Alliance in Sierra Leone, where he leads a team of IT practitioners in developing a digital transformation roadmap and government enterprise architecture blueprint for the government of Sierra Leone. He is a strong advocate and practitioner of design thinking techniques and approaches to solve complex problems, and he brings to his consulting work a pragmatic approach based on many years of experience in the private and development sector. Today's session is entitled Intergovernmental Relations in the Context of Governmental Digitalization Initiatives. Intergovernmental relations refer to the set of formal and informal channels through which governments from different levels cooperate and jointly act upon policy matters. These policy matters usually involve complex problems that span across governmental boundaries, thus creating the need for a cooperative approach to tackle them. Without further ado, I will turn things over to Dr. Mensah.
Great, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here to speak at this Data Transformation Government Conference. So today, my job is to walk you through the Sierra Leone journey in terms of digital transformation, and also tell you a bit more about how government organizes itself around developing a digital economy. So just to give you a bit of a background, so my name is Ransford Mensah. I'm actually Ghanaian, but based in Sierra Leone. And I've been in the digital space for the last 15 years, mainly specializing in the areas of enterprise architecture, change management, IT service management, project management, and agile. And like our very able moderator mentioned, I'm also the country lead for the Data Impact Alliance DAO, which is based in the UN Foundation. So maybe let me take a few slides, maybe 1 or 2 slides, just tell you a bit about DAO and what we do. And then after which I'll connect it to the work that we are doing in Sierra Leone in terms of helping the country develop a digital economy. So DAL is a think, do, replicate tank. We combine practical research and evidence-based advocacy to advance the digital inclusion. So what we do at DAL is to identify barriers to the routine use of data solutions and data in service delivery. And we've been housed in the UN Foundation for the last 6 years. And we use a framework called ABC. So ABC, so which is called the Accelerate, Build, and Connect. So most of the country work that we are doing now fits in the category of A, which is more about accelerating. So we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has magnified our reliance on digital tools to study, work, live, and govern. So now more than ever, we've seen that governments are seeing the urgency for digital transformation. The pandemic has also shown that the countries which are most resilient are not those with the highest GDP per capita per se, or the ones which have most ventilators, but rather those who have learned the lessons from prior pandemics, and they are moving quickly to use the digital and data tools to understand and act on a problem, and then able to reach the population with critical information and services. So at that, we believe that more countries can demonstrate that if more countries can demonstrate that their digital and data transformation investments improve service delivery, then new countries can also accelerate their own data transformation and responsible data use journeys. So this is just a little about that and what we do. And now I'll move to the next slide, which is to talk about the current situation in Africa. So like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of movement in terms of the digital transformation space. So governments around the world are leveraging ICT to enhance their service delivery mechanism so that they can improve the government services, as well as be able to gain some competitive advantages in terms of attracting investments. So there's this survey, which is done by the UN, which is called the e-government survey. And in this e-government survey, we are looking at how governments are ranking in terms of public digital services, which is an enabler for effective and transparent and accountable governance. So when you look at this 2020 e-government survey, you realize that all regions are making progress with e-government capabilities, but Africa is showing the greatest growth. So there's a lot of growth in Africa. And although we are still not there, we are still lagging behind developed nations, Africa has the largest share of countries that have moved higher in terms of the e-government development index. And then also looking at the countries which have really climbed are South Africa, Tunisia, Seychelles, and others. And these are more like in the top 100. So now you ask yourself, what is it that is happening in Africa that is creating a trigger for this sudden growth in terms of use of digital public services? And one possible trigger is an alliance we call Smart Africa. So let me move to the next slide. So Smart Africa is an alliance of 30 African heads of states and governments that aims to take the advantage of affordable access to broadband and the use of information communication technology in Africa to establish a knowledge economy. So the goal of the alliance is to develop a single digital market in Africa by 2030. So Smart Africa recently worked with the Kenyan government to develop a very strategic document called the Digital Economy Blueprint. Now, this blueprint seeks to provide a conceptual framework which has been adopted by Kenya in its quest towards the realization of a successful or a sustainable and successful digital economy. So what that means is that this has become more like a document to use for any country that wants to embark on a similar journey, to pick the Kenya blueprint and then customize it into the context of their country and be able to also go through a similar process or a similar journey. So for DAO, which is based in the UN Foundation, we thought it wise that in order to enter Africa and in order to start working with the countries under our framework called ABC, which is A standing for Accelerate, we needed to go through a structure, a known system, which is working with Smart Africa in order to start engaging countries in Africa. So that was a partnership that we established with Smart Africa. And why this partnership? First, because Smart Africa consists of presidents and ministers. So what it means is that it gives us the authority that we need to cause change. And then also it consists of many countries willing to learn from each other. So that means that there's willingness, which is also very key. And then also there's also a strong connection between public sector and the private sector as well. So as soon as you have the private sector involved, that also means that you are creating a mechanism for sustaining some of these investments when it comes to digitalization. So still building on the background, still telling you a bit more about the reason why we started working in Sierra Leone. So in 2020, the World Bank launched a report which provides a very comprehensive assessment of Sierra Leone in 5 key areas. So the World Bank looked at data infrastructure. They also looked at the digital platforms, digital financial services, entrepreneurship, and then digital skills as well. So these were the areas. However, the report revealed something very, 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 very disturbing. The report revealed that the government has implemented a lot of applications for the citizenry, such as Integrated Financial Management Information System, what we call the IFMIS. They also had Asikuda. Asikuda is automated system for customs data, and then also Integrated Human Resource Management System. But then the problem is that these systems do not talk to each other. So if you're a citizen, let's say from the citizen standpoint, or government or department or agency, we are operating in a very fragmented way. What it means is that we also compel citizens to have to interact with multiple platforms in order to get their requests satisfied. So you want a driver's license, you interact differently. You want a marriage certificate, you do that differently. You want a birth and death card, you do that differently. So and when you do that, it delays service delivery. So there's lack of transparency. People have to fill forms continuously. And then also you realize that we are just causing chaos. So nothing seems to be happening. So in the World Bank diagnostic report, some key recommendations were given. One of them is that the government needs to strengthen the leadership and promote institutional and donor coordination for data transformation. The second one is to design and implement a whole of government ICT enterprise architecture. The third one was to create a trust environment for digital government. The fourth one, establish a shared platform for services. And the fifth one is the implementation of a national data center as a base. So these were the main recommendations from the World Bank report. So we looked at this report, and in April 2021, the Digital Impact Alliance, based in the UN Foundation, which is DAO, and me acting as a country lead, we partnered with the government of Sierra Leone to provide support for digital government and to accelerate the creation of an inclusive digital economy. Why did we partner the government of Sierra Leone? First, there was high political will. So we had support from the president himself. Then there's also a strong vision for digital transformation. And then government had already started reorganizing its structures in order to make sure that they're able to meet this digital vision. So when we got into Sierra Leone, we decided to concentrate on 2 of the recommendations. So recommendation 1, which is the development of the institutional and frameworks, and the recommendation 2, which is the development of an enterprise architecture framework. So these were the 2 main areas we decided to concentrate on. And this was informed by the Digital Transformation Building Blocks, which is a paper published by IBM some years back, but it's still very relevant in terms of digitalization and driving towards the digital economy. So I'll quickly highlight some of these building blocks. So infrastructure, we are looking at policy and legal and regulatory framework, digital government platforms, privacy, security, integrity, and others. So, and the digital ecosystem is said that one player cannot do it all. So you need to make sure that you come in with a spirit of collaboration. Said that you take areas that you have strengths in, and then you allow other players to also come in and support, because one single partner cannot support the government in a full data transformation journey. That is impossible. So then in digital transformation using the building blocks, we are putting high priority on speed and agility, because take note that this is governments that we are working with. Governments have limited timelines. So it can be either 4 years or 5 years. So it means that in the 4 or 5 years, they need to show value to the citizenry, that this is what they've done with the taxpayers' money. So therefore, they should vote for them again. So then there's also those time constraints. So we needed to make sure that using this building block approach, it means that you are very flexible and agile. And then also it allows you to identify the various components of transformation that can work in synergies. And then we are also able to build capability of the owners, which will be more like the ICT practitioners of the government, and so that they can also praise their own digital services without necessarily always relying on the donor or external partners. So in doing this, I've spoken about a partnership with Smart Africa. I've also spoken about the fact that Sierra Leone had a high political will. I've also spoken about the fact that there were some recommendations provided by the World Bank. One was the setup of an institutional framework, and then the other one was to set up an enterprise architecture framework, because these are the areas that as a UN agency, we have strengths in. So then between January and December, we helped the government to develop its first national digital development policy, and then also accompanied by strategy. So what it means is that when you go back to the building blocks, so we are setting up the policy, legal and regulatory framework. That's what we are doing now. So we're able to set up these very strategic documents, and this defines the way. So for anyone who is coming into this ecosystem, they know that this is where government is going. So let me give you a snapshot. Let me give you a view of how this policy is structured. So you see that it has quite a number of pillars, and they also has cross-cutting themes, and then it also has its main vision that Sierra Leone becomes a middle income economy by 2039. So we are leapfrogging and we are leveraging ICT in order to do that. There's a saying that if somebody has done it before, why repeat? Learn from that person. And that is what most countries in Africa are doing now. Looking at case studies from Estonia, looking at case studies from Canada, looking at case studies from all the countries who have done very well in terms of digitalization of services, and how best we can learn from their experience, so that we could not make the same mistakes, but we actually leapfrog and then be able to catch or get to the level that they are. So these are the pillars for digital transformation in Sierra Leone. They also have the cross-cutting teams. But there was also another issue. Now, because the country has been through a number of challenges, one of them is civil war, they were deploying infrastructure as at when. So today we'll have a financial management system here. Tomorrow we have an HR system here. And then the next day we'll have another system coming up. In the beginning, it all made sense. It didn't look too strange and it wasn't very disturbing. But look at this slide. Now, as more systems come up and as the citizens require government to deliver more online services, look at it now. It becomes very messy. It becomes so difficult, to the extent that now government has created a big problem. There's no way to navigate through. They do not know who the custodian of these services are, and it is total confusion. So then we needed to look at the second recommendation from the World Bank, which is setting up or developing an enterprise architecture framework. Because in a situation like this, it is only an enterprise architecture framework that can help you navigate. Great. So just to do a bit of literature, forgive me, the academia in me sometimes come out. So let me just do a slide literature, then we'll connect it to the practical aspect. So when you go to literature and you are looking at building blocks for digitalization or digital transformation, there are 8 main blocks that people talk about. So this is not too different from what I've spoken earlier, but these are bigger umbrellas. So we have data strategy, you're looking at the digital platforms, value-driven ecosystem, digital enterprise architecture, institutions, governance, citizen insights, and delivery capabilities. So these are some of the building blocks that they do. But let's look at the combination. And let's look at row 3. So if you put all these building blocks together and there's no enterprise architecture framework, what it means is that you are developing, or it's rather 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's look at row 4 rather. So without an enterprise architecture framework, that means that you are developing solutions or platforms which lack integration. So there's no a whole of government approach to it. So, and I prepared this slide because this looks very interesting. So then we have government services coming in. The citizens are asking for services and government is always reactive, trying to meet citizen needs, trying to, and this is what happens to a lot of technology companies, even the private sector, where instead of being in front of service delivery, we are rather behind. So then all the time you're overwhelmed with requests. Then it gets to a stage where now IT is seen as a black box. So if you are seen as a black box, it means that poor customer satisfaction with your services because you are always reactive. And some of the issues that you have are you do not have relevant metrics. It's very difficult to make decisions and others. So let's look at government. What is government also going through? So some of the issues they face are integration issues, lack of knowledge sharing, security issues, and then lack of standards. So maybe let me highlight on them slightly. So integration, because there are various applications within various government departments. So what it does is that this leads to silos. So every department wants to own their own data sets. They want to own their own procedures. They do not want to share others. And this leads to duplication of work and then increased cost of ownership and then complexity as well. Now, in most of these countries, the practitioners in there are not as many in terms of their skill set and knowledge. So normally you find the best IT people in ministries where there's funding, like finance, like education, and those are or health also. Those are the places that you find out that there are many IT practitioners who are relatively well paid and then also are skilled. But you go to other ministries and there's nothing like that. However, those who are good are not sharing their knowledge. So the successes at the Ministry of Finance, Health, or Education are not being shared with the smaller ministries. And then you're also creating security issues. Of late, there's a lot of talk about cybersecurity. Please give me 1 second. Of late, there's a lot of talk about cybersecurity and others. And this is a huge concern of, I just came from a discussion on data sovereignty and others. So it means that when you are creating systems like this, you're exposing critical citizen information, because then also compliance is not uniform, and you are creating many challenges for governments. So we talk about compliance, there's no standards as well. So then you find out that the issues are actually deeper, and you are just creating a cost center for yourself because there's no sustainability module. So these are some of the issues that not just Sierra Leone, but most governments face when they are trying to come out to implement or go the route of a digital economy, which requires you to look internally in your services and then you try and streamline. So let's go. So most governments in the developing countries, like I mentioned, not only Sierra Leone, are going through this. So there's confusion. They don't know where to pass. And citizens are also not satisfied with the services that they are receiving. And in some cases, what I've seen governments do is to roll out separate networks. So for example, for every application or system they deploy, there's a separate network rolled out to support that. And that is even creating further confusion because no guidelines, no standards, nothing. So you're just creating chaos. However, with enterprise architecture framework, we're able to overcome these issues. So then an enterprise architecture framework that is citizen focused, that is open, that is standard based, that is transparent, that is scalable, that is results oriented, and that is dynamic. And that is what the government needs. So you hear buzzwords like agility, you hear buzzwords like interoperability, ability to migrate, scalability, and others. So some of the benefits, common language, definitely, enhances collaboration, and then also you're able to describe and analyze your IT investments much better. And then also is able to assist governments in its transformation journey. So then, but you need to understand something that all these also requires change. So then now you have to look at the element of change because you need entry points in order to digitize services. You can't go with a big bang approach. You need your entry point so that you can use that to gain momentum and confidence in order to bring on the more challenging services. So one framework that we use is something we call the change space analysis. And this is me telling you work that we've done in Sierra Leone. And this is based on three spaces. So authority, acceptance, and ability. So you only find a place for change when these three places or these three circles overlap. So as soon as they overlap, it means that you found your entry to change. If they do not overlap, it means I need to work on that factor. So recently there's a discussion about the 4 Ps for digitalization, of which political will, it used to be 4 Ps, and now another P has been added, which is more on political will. Why? Because in our change space analysis, authority is very important. So if you do not have the authority, it means that the government or the citizens are not ready for the change that is coming. So we did all that change space analysis, the reason why we went through the journey of developing a policy and a strategy. So then we come to the meat itself, which is a whole of government enterprise architecture framework. And in this journey, we adopted a known practice. Like I mentioned earlier, now everything is out there. In fact, I really discourage people from building or trying to find new or trying to build everything from scratch. It is always good to scope and see if somebody has done it before. Then based on that, then you pick it up and improve it. So when it comes to enterprise architecture framework, is to scope what others have done. So we have India, we have Australia, we have Rwanda, we have so many countries who have developed enterprise architecture frameworks. We have Nigeria as well. And all of them base their frameworks around best practice, which is TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework. So we also looked at the TOGAF. We looked at how we could customize it, but it's not just about one-to-one mapping, but making sure that you're able to put it in the context of your environment. So in customizing it, we went through a cycle. So looking at what we call the ADM. So you're looking at the various stages and then adding elements of Agile to it. So making it a bit more iterative. So let me bring up the next slide. So that shows a bit of the iterations. So then we are looking at building architecture capability first, getting the architecture right. So defining the assets and to be, and then also going through a system of change management, getting the governance right, and then now being able to develop reference models and standards that can guide the implementation of some of these initiatives. Now, one thing that you also need to take note of is that when you are developing an enterprise architecture frameworks or reference models, it does not mean that you're an implementer. So what it means is that as soon as the reference models are defined and the guidelines are defined, then now it is the work of a PMO, which is a project or a program management office, to pick these reference models or these opportunities and solutions and then implement them as projects. So as part of our work in Sierra Leone, we also set up a program or a project management office, which will then pick the defined opportunities and solutions under the architecture module. And then based on that, they can then now do the implementation or the rollout. So this is beautiful. But again, we faced another problem. And I've taken you back 2 slides because I really wanted to show you this. One thing is that we are building for sustainability, right? We are making sure that governments are able to take ownership. But then realize that government did not have the requisite skill sets. And when I say government, they lead IT practitioners of key ministries, departments, and agencies. They don't have the skill set to be able to even develop their own architecture, because normally architecture blueprints are living documents. So they always have to go back, you always have to update it, revise it, and things like that. So it's not permanent. So in doing that, then we started a series of capability trainings. So then this is all about building the capacity. So we settled on some core programs. Some, many of you in this session may be familiar with. So we had the principles of digital development. I'll speak a bit more about it. We also have ITEL, which is for IT service management, so IT infrastructure library. They also had a COBIT for IT governance. Then we had Prince 2, projects in a controlled environment for the project management bit. And then we had TOGAF itself. So then we picked 20 IT practitioners who are more like the custodians of key government information systems to go through these series of trainings so that we can build their capacity in order to start developing their own architecture reference models and be able to even maintain the architecture blueprint. So just to highlight slightly on some of these courses. So the principles of digital development, it was our very first program. Why? We needed government to speak one language. It is very important. So one language is that they are going to design with the user, they are going to understand the ecosystem, they are going to design for scale, they have to be data-driven and others. And it is on these principles that the government also further develop its architecture principles and develop its architecture vision. So those were the guidelines. So and I encourage those of us here to look at the principles of data development. It is for all practitioners, not necessarily the development sector. But then, and what it does is that it allows you to be able to guide your implementation with certain thoughts, that you are being collaborative, that you are looking at open standards and open source. You're also looking at addressing privacy and security and others. This may sound basic, very basic to some of us, but it is very good to mention it and not make assumptions when you are dealing with government partners. So we went through these trainings. Then now, because, in developing architectures, we are saying that it's going to have reference models as well, because we are bringing standards, we are bringing guidelines, we are making sure that government can design to scale. We're also making sure that government can design using its minimum resources and capabilities. So then we linked it to GovStack, and this is huge now in countries that are trying to digitize their services. So with GovStack, it's just an organization, or it's a group of experts. It consists of ITU, we have GIZ, we also have DAL involved, and they are developing specification on reusable software components, which we call the building blocks. And that can be used to define various e-government services. So see it as Lego pieces. So based on what you are doing, based on the context, you can always reshuffle and then remake these Lego pieces. And that is what GovStack is all about. So it's a movement. And the next 5 years, the plan is to empower governments to take ownership of their data futures by building more effective and then also cost-efficient digital government services. So with this process, what it means is that you are ensuring sustainability, okay, of government services. Then now it is for us to also tell government that now that you've developed these reference models, there are also places where you can learn from proven solutions. So what proven solutions, what is a repository for these proven solutions? We have the catalog of digital solutions. And this is a collection of solutions across different sectors. They have playbooks. And then also it is designed such that it matches or is able to meet the needs of all the users categorized. So implementers can find reason in what is described in these solutions, donors, technology, and then also product owners as well, where you are looking at even discussions on using digital public goods or trying to, which is like open source, which is mapped to the SDGs. So there's a lot going on. So currently, this is where the government has got into, how to define their blueprints for enterprise architecture, how to define the various reference models, and then based on that, now pick the solutions that they need. So now the question one may ask is, you can just simply come in and tell government, hey, do that, and things like that. And then you shouldn't be able to walk through all these journey. Now, the reason we did all that is because we wanted to avoid a terminology or something that happens a lot with government, which is isomorphic mimicry. What that means is that there's a high tendency for somebody or for an institution to look like something they are not in order to enjoy some benefits. And this is what has led to failure of many projects in many countries. So what isomorphic mimicry simply means is that, for example, you see these two frogs here. Sorry, let me go back. You see that they may look the same at the first glance, but then the stripes are a bit different. So one is poisonous and one is not. But over the years, the one that is not poisonous has managed to change its skin to look like the one that is poisonous in order to survive. So that's what, but then truly, it's not delivering the value that you are looking for. So that is what happens with isomorphic mimicry. And the reason why we have spent a lot of time in developing first policies, then now looking at how government can connect its services. So then we spoke about enterprise architecture framework. And then now making sure that there's ownership and there's the elements of what sustainability. So then we are building capacity. At the same time, too, we are looking at what building reference models, and then now linking governments to a catalog of proven solutions so that they can truly leapfrog as they desire in order to hit their target of Vision 2039, which is to become a middle income economy. So just to end on these last slides, I thought that I should bring back the structure of the policy, just to give you a high level snapshot. And this is not just us or the DAL or me leading this project. There are many other players in the system. So going back to my very first statement, that digital transformation is not just one player. It requires collaboration. It's a whole ecosystem. So then you have the USAID, ITU, you have the World Bank, GIZ, and others all involved, but making sure that we are mapping their interventions to the pillars defined by government. So it is government-led and not donor-led or not led by any development partner. But government's voice is very strong, and government is saying that this is how, or this is what we want to do. This is the only way that you can remove waste, duplication, and ensure that resources are used effectively and efficiently. So thank you very much. I'll bring my presentation to an end.
Dr. Mensah, thank you. This is such an enlightening, informative presentation. There's a lot to unpack here, and I would encourage anyone that has a question, please post it in the QA section. But just to kick things off, I have a personal question to ask of you. Sometimes digitalization or digitization can be quite overwhelming. There's just so much information out there. How do you know where to start? How do you prioritize what you should be doing?
Yes. So how to know where to start from is dependent on your strategy and your policy. So you remember that when I was telling the Sierra Leone story, so normally the policy gives you the institutional framework, and the strategy actually tells you the priorities, which one is short term, which one is medium term, which one is long term. And this is a collective decision made by government on what to do. And then based on that, it then defines the flow. Because then also, you need to map your starting point to the resources that you have. So it needs to be done strategically. So that's a very, very good question to ask. Yeah.
Sort of an add-on to that question would be, to a large extent, the world is still drowning in paper. And I'm wondering if paper-based information assets were an issue for you. And how do you rationalize taking a day forward approach versus going back and converting legacy information holdings? It's just some type of value proposition that has to be examined.
Exactly that. So in some cases, for example, in a country like Sierra Leone, there is not much to unpack. Or rather, what is there to do is to help them quickly digitize manual platforms or systems. But in countries like Ghana, where I've worked before, there's quite a lot done already. So in that case, what we then did was to make sure that all these platforms were coming up with APIs, and then we're creating an exchange, a data exchange road, so that all these systems just plug your APIs in there. We are not saying that dismantle your platform, but just plug your APIs to one big highway, one big road, so that we can create that seamless experience for the citizen.
Okay, here's a twofold question. How did you pick the participants for the training? And how did you spread the terminology across government? By that, I assume it's to ensure consistent terminology.
Yes, and that's a very good question. So let me start with how we pick the participants and how we are building their capacity. So the first thing was to understand the ecosystem. So to look at who are the strong ministries and agencies. So for example, finance, education, health, energy, agriculture, strong ministries with strong funding from donors, and also who are custodians of key information systems. Then we went in there to then ask ourselves, who are the heads? Who are those heading these or owning these information systems? We found out that they are the heads of IT and the assistants. So then they become our focal persons to work with, because going back to the change space analysis, it means that they have the authority in order to make change or in order to drive change. So that's how we selected the participants for this training. Knowing government ministries and agencies who are key players, and then also knowing those who own key information systems, and then pulling them into a training room and trying to build their capacity. Then now going to the next question of the language. So one thing that we also did was to pick, for example, government ministers and take them through a 101 program, where then we are teaching them, not necessarily teaching, but then telling them about the trends and what is happening. And then that alone also helped to change the language. That is still work in progress. We are not done yet, but at least now certain terminologies are being used across, for example, being user-centric, reusable, being able to resort to open source or open standards, do not build. So that is, these are thematic areas which are going through government's conversations, and those are very good signs of progress made.
It sounds like education and awareness is a critical success factor.
Exactly that.
Yeah. One other question, what about the legal admissibility of these digitized electronic records? issues, advice for us?
Yes. So when you say legal, so every country so there's the data protection law, and then also there's the data privacy laws, and then there are also elements of cybersecurity. So when we develop the policy, what you also realize is that some of these other policies have been developed already, even before a national policy. So then we made sure that they were also captured in retrospective. So we captured that as part of the national policy so that then we could have an all-encompassing national document. So those issues were also addressed in these very important government documents.
Perfect. I think that is just about it for questions, unless anyone else has something that they want to ask of Dr. Mensah. I'd like to thank you for what I consider to be a truly outstanding presentation. So much information you provided to us and actionable, realistic type information. So this is just great. So Dr. Mensah, on behalf of everyone, conference organizers and participants, thank you so very much. I now suggest that we break for coffee, and we'll be coming back at 2:30 this afternoon for additional sessions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Once again, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a nice day.